The Pharaoh's Secret Garden, the sacred and psychedelic world of ancient Egypt. A comprehensive exploration of ritual, chemistry, and consciousness in the Nile Valley. Introduction. Beyond the Stone Facade. The popular imagination venerates ancient Egypt as a civilization of austere grandeur, a silent, solemn world of immutable pyramids, impassive sphinxes, and meticulously wrapped mummies, all governed by an unchanging divine order known as Ma'at. This image, however, captures only the monumental, public-facing shell. To step inside the temples, the banquet halls, and the private chambers of the soul is to discover a civilization pulsating with a vibrant, sophisticated, and intentional pursuit of altered states of consciousness. Far from being a culture opposed to ecstasy or chemical transcendence, ancient Egypt was a pioneer in sacralizing psychoactive experience, weaving it into the very fabric of religion, medicine, and daily social life. This is the story of the Pharaoh's Secret Garden, an exploration of how the Egyptians used botanical and fermented chemistry not for escapism, but as a sacred technology to commune with the divine, heal the body, unify society, and navigate the journey to eternity. To understand this dimension, we must discard modern, often prejudiced categories like recreational drug use. In the Egyptian worldview, the material and spiritual realms were not separate, they interpenetrated. The gods were immanent forces active in the natural world, in the sun's rebirth at dawn, the Nile's life-giving flood, and the mind's capacity for vision. Altering one's conscious state, therefore, was a deliberate method of tuning one's earthly instrument to better receive celestial frequencies. It was a form of spiritual work, a technique of ecstasy sanctioned and often administered by the priestly class. Their quest was for seshta, wisdom, insight, and ak, effective, luminous spiritual power, and their toolkit was the rich pharmacopoeia offered by the Nile Valley and the vast trade networks that connected Egypt to the Levant, Africa, and the Mediterranean. This exploration will journey through the lush landscape of this sacred chemistry. We will begin with the iconic blue lotus, move through the communal frenzy of the Feast of Drunkenness, demystify the staple that was beer, and inhale the sacred smoke of kifi. We will confront the dangerous power of mandrake, examine the evidence for cannabis and opium, and witness the institutionalized trance of divine possession. We will see how access to these experiences was hierarchically controlled and how they were so vital they were packed for the ultimate journey into the afterlife. Finally, we will contemplate what this profound integration of mind-altering substances tells us about the Egyptian concept of the self, the community, and the cosmos. This is not a tale of decadence, but one of sacred pragmatism, a civilization that understood the chemistry of consciousness as a bridge to the divine. Chapter 1. The Elegant Euphoric, the Blue Lotus Flower. Our journey appropriately begins with the most aesthetically revered of Egypt's psychoactive allies, the blue lotus flower. Its image is ubiquitous in Egyptian art, from the exquisite grave goods of Tutankhamun to the tomb paintings of nobles at Thebes. It is held delicately to the noses of pharaohs, offered to guests at lavish banquets, and woven into the hair of dancers and deities alike. More than mere ornament, the blue lotus was a potent symbol of life, rebirth, and the sun's creative power, owing to its habit of closing at night and reopening each morning. But its significance was much more than symbolic, it was deeply experiential. The psychoactive properties of Nymphaea caerulea are now well attributed to alkaloids such as apomorphine, a dopamine agonist and emetic, and nuciferine, which acts on serotonin receptors. These compounds produce mild sedative and euphorian effects, often described as a calm, dreamy, and mildly psychedelic state, characterized by visual enhancement, relaxation, and a sense of serene dissociation. The Egyptians mastered a simple yet effective method of extraction, steeping the dried petals, or sometimes the whole flower, in jars of wine for several days. This created a fragrant, infused wine that carried the lotus's essence into the body of the drinker. The consumption of this lotus wine is depicted in numerous banquet scenes from tombs. Guests, adorned in fine linen and perfumed cones, are shown holding lotus blossoms, sniffing their scent, or being served cups by attendants. The accompanying texts often speak of making holiday and experiencing joy and delight. The effect, as best we can interpret, was a gentle, warm, floaty euphoria. It softened the edges of perception, eased social inhibitions, and promoted a contemplative, often spiritual mood. It was the perfect substance for elite social gatherings that were also acts of religious and communal affirmation, celebrations of life in the face of mortality. But its use transcended the banquet. The blue lotus was intrinsically linked to solar theology and rebirth. Its daily cycle mirrored the sun god Ra's journey through the sky and the underworld. To ingest the lotus was to assimilate this regenerative power. In temple rituals, it may have been used by priests to induce a state of receptive tranquility conducive to prayer or vision. It was also a tool for the bereaved. Its mild euphoric and dream-enhancing properties could have served as a comfort, a way to feel connected to the deceased in the liminal states of sleep and dream. The Eber's Papyrus, a foundational medical text, even lists it as an ingredient in a remedy for a motherless child, perhaps alluding to its comforting, nurturing psychoactive effects. The spiritual dimension cannot be overstated. The act of holding the flower to one's nose, so commonly depicted, was a ritual gesture known as inhaling the breath of life or the scent of the gods. It was a direct, sensual communion with the divine. The psychoactive effect validated this communion. One didn't just believe one was closer to the gods, one felt it. This blurred line between somatic experience and spiritual truth is central to understanding all Egyptian sacred chemistry. Finally, the blue lotus was a crucial companion in death. Bouquets of lotus have been placed on mummies, and garlands woven from them adorned coffins. The famous funeral bouquet from Tutankhamun's innermost coffin contained perfectly preserved blue lotus petals. This was not merely a beautiful offering, it was a functional provision for the soul's journey. Just as the deceased needed food, water, clothing, and spells, the Book of the Dead, they also needed the tools for spiritual journeying. The blue lotus was therefore a psychedelic passport to the afterlife. Chapter 2. The Divine Debauch, the Feast of Drunkenness. If the blue lotus represented the gentle, individual, and contemplative path to the gods, the Feast of Drunkenness, the Heb, Nefer, and Inti, was its polar opposite, a chaotic, cathartic, and collective explosion of sacred ecstasy. This annual festival, celebrated nationwide but with particular fervor in the cult center of the goddess Hathor at Dentera, was an exercise in state-sanctioned, ritualized mass intoxication. It was theology enacted through embodied communal frenzy. The festival's mythological underpinning is crucial. It commemorated the saving of mankind from the wrath of the Eye of Ra. According to myth, the sun god Ra, grown old and facing rebellion from humanity, sent his daughter, the goddess Hathor, in her fierce, destructive aspect as the Eye of Ra, to punish them. She descended into a bloodlust, slaughtering humans across the earth. To stop the genocide before it was complete, Ra devised a clever ruse. He had the gods flood the fields of the distant goddess Sekhet Hemet with 7,000 jars of beer mixed with red ochre or pomegranate juice to resemble blood. The bloodthirsty Hathor, finding this vast lake, drank from it eagerly, became intoxicated, fell into a deep sleep, and awoke pacified, having forgotten her murderous mission. Humanity was saved through divine inebriation. The festival was a literal, participatory reenactment of this salvation myth. It was typically held in the early days of the inundation season, linking it to themes of fertility, renewal, and the dangerous, life-giving power of the Nile's flood. The ritual directive was explicit: to drink to the point of ecstatic trance, to replicate the saving drunkenness of Hathor. Priests and priestesses, embodying the gods of the myth, would lead the rites. Texts from Dentura instruct, be drunk at her feast, drink to intoxication, drink to the point of passing out, for it is she who protects her son, the king, she who repels the enemy. The atmosphere was a controlled chaos. Drumming, clapping, and the shaking of Sistra, Hathor's sacred rattle, created a relentless, hypnotic rhythm. Dancing was not formalized, but ecstatic and abandon-filled. Participants drank copious amounts of strong, dark beer, specifically chosen to mimic the blood of the myth, and wine, often enhanced with psychoactive additives like mandrake or blue lotus to accelerate the process. The goal was to reach a state of total ego dissolution, where individual consciousness merged with the collective roar and the perceived presence of the goddess. Vomiting and collapse were not signs of